Welcome to the Peaceful Parenting Podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Rosensweet, mom of 3 young people, peaceful parenting coach, and your cheerleader and guide on all things parenting. Each week, we'll cover the tools, strategies, and support you need to end the yelling and power struggles and encourage your kids to listen and cooperate so that you can enjoy your family time. I'm happy to say we have a great relationship with our 3 kids. The teen years have been easy and joyful, not because we're special unicorns, but because my kids were raised with peaceful parenting. I've also helped so many parents just like you stop struggling and enjoy their kids again. I'm excited to be here with you today and bring you the insight and information you need to make your parenting journey a little more peaceful. Let's dive into this week's conversation. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Peaceful Parenting Podcast. I'm so excited because today is our 200th episode. We have been putting out this podcast for 4 years. I can't believe it. It's been so much fun, and I've talked to so many great people and learned so much from you and from all of the guests that I've interviewed, and I hope that this has been really great for you. If you are a new listener, go back and check out our archives. Look at our past episodes. We've had some just really amazing guests and really great topics that we've talked about. If you love the podcast, we would so appreciate it if you could rate and review us on Apple and Spotify, leave us a review on Apple, and of course, share this podcast with a family or a parent that you think might like to hear it and might learn from it. Today's guest is Jackie Silver. She is a nutritionist, and I actually found out about her because Corey worked with her and just had such wonderful things to say about working with her. She has a neurodivergent affirming lens for working with families, and she really helps parents to shift how they're thinking about feeding their kids and also giving real specific strategies when feeding kids is hard, whether it's that you feel like your kids are eating, quote, too much, or you worry that they don't have enough variety and they're picky eaters, or they have sensory challenges that make eating hard and makes feeding them hard. And Corey just loved working with Jackie so much, and she found working with Jackie so helpful that I had to talk to her and have her on the podcast. So I'm so pleased to have Jackie Silver, nutritionist, talking with us today. And also, I would like to say that I'm excited that we have a sponsor on board for the podcast now. I just said it's been 4 years since I started this podcast, and I've never had a sponsor before because I never could think of anyone that I wanted to reach out to whose product I really believed in. And I found that with Yoto is a screen-free audiobook player or music player, whatever you want to have your kids listen to. You can either buy pre-recorded cards from Yoto of classic books or some of the newer fun books, or you can make your own cards for kids with your own music or MP3 files. And Yoto also has original content, podcasts and radio, and also has some really great features like an okay to wake clock, white noise for sleeping. It has a sleep timer, so you can set it to go off if you're letting your kids listen to something as they fall asleep. You can set it to go off after a little while so it doesn't go all night. We didn't have Yotos when my kids were little, but I did find that my daughter used to listen to audiobooks and it really helped her to play independently. And that's actually something Corey has said as well. Being able to listen to things really helps kids play independently, and it's screen free. It's not connected to the internet, and it is such a game changer for so many families. Again, I wish we had it when my kids were little. Before we get to today's podcast, pause this and go and check out reimaginepeacefulparenting.com/Yoto to find out all about the Yoto player and what a game-changing parenting tool it is. Okay, let's dive in and meet Jackie. Hi, Jackie. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, it's so great to be here.
Yeah, I've heard so much about you from Corey. Corey, who works with me, worked with you, and she just went on and on about how much you helped her. So I was keen to get you on the podcast so other people can know about you and the work that you do and learn from you. So welcome.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
So can you just tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, my name is Jackie Silver. I am a registered dietitian. I run my own practice, Jackie Silver Nutrition. We are a team. I have another lovely dietitian on my team, and we work with neurodivergent kids, teens, and adults across Ontario in Canada. And then I'm also licensed in the States. So I also see clients in New York, from New York, New Jersey, all many different states, and it's all a virtual private practice.
Amazing. We'll put links to how to work with you in the show notes because I'm sure after listening to you, a lot of people are going to wonder how to do that. So we'll link to it. So, why did you choose to specialize in helping neurodivergent people with eating?
Yes, great question. So during my master's, I did my master's of health science in nutrition communications at Toronto Metropolitan University. And we had a 10-month dietetic internship rotations at different placements. And one of my placements was with Special Olympics. So I got to teach cooking classes and sport nutrition classes to athletes with intellectual disabilities. Many of them were autistic or had other intellectual developmental disabilities, IDD. And it was here that I started to see that there's a really big need to support this community. And then I started my practice in the thick of the pandemic lockdowns of 2020. And I was making a profile on this healthcare directory listing, and they had autism and ADHD there that you could check off as having experience with. So I naively checked it off because of my experience with the Special Olympics. And I didn't think anything of it. And then I started getting all these requests to work with autistic children or children with ADHD and adults as well. And so I really saw that there's a big need and not very many dietitians are serving this need. So I decided to go all in and I'm really passionate about it.
I'm glad that we found you. When I do a summit every year about raising complex kids, and I tried to
Mm.
find somebody who specialized in feeding neurodivergent kids, and it was really hard to find someone, the 2 years ago, and so I ended up leaving it off of the program, but we'll have to have you this
Oh,
coming
wow.
fall and back and have you for our summit 'cause it's definitely a need, like, it's something that a lot of parents struggle with, and
Oh,
I think
yes.
it's really hard. Not only it's hard in practice, but it's hard on parents because feeding children is so representative of nurturing, right? And
Mm.
often, if you have a kid who won't eat or a kid who you feel that they're not eating properly or well, it can make you feel like a bad parent.
Oh, yes. I've heard many parents have told me they feel like failures, that they cannot feed their children and that it's so hard to feed their children. They feel so much shame over
Mhm.
that. And so, yeah, a lot of my work is telling them, you are doing your best. This is really difficult and trying to, yeah, just providing that empathy and encouraging them to release that shame around it because it's really not their fault. And if you think about it, feeding is the one task that humans need to do multiple times a day for every single day of their life.
Yeah.
So, how could it be easy when you think about it through that perspective? There's no, and also with kids, we have to feed kids multiple times a day for their life. It's one of the only tasks, like you don't need to bathe 5 times a day. You don't need to exercise times a day. You don't need to brush your teeth 5 times a day. But with feeding, we do. So it's not easy.
And it's also something that we have little to no control over as parents, which is so hard.
Mm.
It's so hard when you feel like you want something to go a certain way, but you really, not only should you not try to control it, but you can't control it even if you could, even if it was a good idea. So I think there's
Exactly.
powerlessness along with that shame and fear.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's up to the kid
Yeah.
ultimately to decide if they're going to eat, when they want to eat, and all that. Yeah.
What do you find are some common challenges with your population of neurodivergent children and families that you work with?
Great question. So I see a lot of selective eating. I don't love the word picky eating. It kind of has a negative connotation to it. So I like the word selective eating instead. So I see that a lot in autistic children, also in children with ADHD. And I'm trained in sensory feeding therapy. So I use those skills, a lot of different tools from that training and other training to coach parents on how to introduce new foods with their kids. Along with selective eating, often comes kids who might be underweight, falling off their growth curve, malnourished. So I work with parents on that as well, how to increase calories, how to get them back on their growth curve. I often recommend they get blood work from the pediatrician to check if there's any nutrient deficiencies so that we can fill that in with supplementation. I will also see for kids with ADHD who are on stimulant medications, it often suppresses their appetite. And that's also often when we see them start to fall off their growth curve or start to lose weight, which is really not good, especially for a growing child. So I'll work with the families on that and come up with also ways to that their kids can eat something that feels safe while they have a low appetite or might be feeling nauseous. Oftentimes the doctors are threatening to take the kids off the medication unless they gain their weight back and grow. So I support with that. I also see a lot of kids who are lack that interoceptive awareness of their hunger and fullness cues. So I'll teach them in a kid-friendly way how to start to recognize those. I see a lot of GI issues, a lot of constipation, which is very connected to autism. And also if you're a selective eater, not really eating much fiber, more likely to be constipated. So I'll see that. I'll see food allergies, IBS like symptoms. So I'll help with that. And also for older kids, so like teens, often there are some body image issues that come up as well, and it could be from, the way that parents speak to their children, not obviously not never intentional, not intentionally wanting to breed anything negative, but I do see, parents coming to me saying, "Oh, my kid needs to lose weight. I keep telling them to watch what they eat." And so and that's often like people who grow up with parents commenting on their body, they're more likely to develop disordered eating patterns into adolescence and adulthood. And that's the last thing that I want to happen. So I'll coach the parents on how to talk to their teens in about their bodies in a neutral way and about food in a neutral way and not commenting on how they look, not commenting on how much they're eating or on calories, anything like that. And yeah, so that's a lot of unlearning as well
Wow, it
happens
sounds like
in
you
our work.
have a very broad scope of the different types of challenges that you work with. Like it's not, that's a lot. That's a
Mhm.
lot of different challenges.
Yeah, yeah. When people think dietitian, they think, oh, you just do weight loss or oh, you provide a special diet to cure autism. But that's absolutely not what I do.
No, that's wild. I like how you said that you don't use the word, you don't like to say picky eating, that you like to say selective eating. I remember I read somewhere that someone said picky eating is usually only a problem for the other people, not for the person who's been labeled a picky eater. Like they're usually quite happy with the foods that they're eating, and it's everybody else who thinks it's a problem that they're not eating enough different kinds of foods. And
Mhm.
on that note, how does a parent know when when it's a quote problem? Like, how do you know if your kid, so your kid, has 10 things that they like to eat and they're not, they might eat only apples and baby carrots and chicken and toast or something, it's like not just one thing. Would you say like, I don't know, I guess just how do you know when your child has crossed the line from being a selective eater and we'll just like leave them alone to their preferences to we need to make some changes?
Yeah. So I would say if the narrowed palate is affecting the child's growth, if the child is losing weight or not gaining weight, then that's a problem. If the doctor has found, iron deficiency or another nutrient deficiency, that could be an indication. I would say also if the child is having constipation, bowel issues, that could be an indication. Also, if the family is just honestly really struggling to come up with what to serve at
Mhm.
dinner time and also is struggling to take their kids out to restaurants or to grandma and grandpa's,
Vacation or yeah.
on vacation, yeah, because a lot of times I'll hear like, "We it's really hard for us to travel because there's nothing my kid will eat," or, "We don't go to restaurants because there's nothing my kid will eat." So, that's impacting quality of life, and so that is certainly an indication to seek professional guidance.
Those are good markers. So if your child's doctor has concerns about their growth or their nutrition, like if iron deficiency or something like that, or
Mhm.
if it's impacting your quality of life, either for the individual or as a family, those are good signs.
Yeah,
Yeah.
or if you end up making a different meal for your kid than what you eat, you know,
Mhm.
than what the parents eat. and that makes it really stressful. Like if the parents are stressed, I'd say that is also an indication because
Right.
I yeah.
That makes sense. So, can you talk a little bit about how complex eating is? Corey told me to ask you about the steps of eating.
Yeah, so eating is definitely complex when we think about it in general, and also the fact that it's something we have to do multiple times a day for our entire lives. And there's, diet culture reflects our eating and cultural preferences and societal messages and messages from our doctor. And, that all adds to the complexity of feeding. And so what you were asking is about the steps to feeding. So I learned about this when I did my training in the SOS approach to feeding, the sequential oral sensory approach to feeding. And we went through this staircase, so to speak, of the different steps that come before you get to the point of actually eating a food. So, and it involves all the senses. So if a child if a parent keeps saying, "Oh, just try the broccoli, just try it," but the child can't even tolerate having it in the kitchen while they're eating, then we gotta scale it way back and start with those earlier steps. So it starts with tolerating the food, tolerating it in the kitchen, tolerating it on the table, then on your plate, interacting with it. That could mean using gloves if touching is really difficult, or just like using utensils to interact with the food, or cooking, mixing things together. And then there's touching and smelling and feeling and maybe putting a food like close to your mouth and putting it to your lips, then putting it in your mouth and spitting out, or in your mouth taking 2 bites, then spitting out, then finally eating. So there's multiple steps that come. And I find when I show parents this chart, it really calms them down because they can see, okay, you know what? Like my child, right? They can't tolerate many of these foods. So I shouldn't have that expectation that they should suddenly start eating them.
Right.
Yeah.
I was just visiting on the weekend. I was just visiting somebody with a baby who's 9 months old. And you can really see the steps to feeding in if you watch a baby eat, because they're, like,
Mm.
squishing the food, like, she had it on her high chair, and she's, like, squishing it and putting it in her mouth and spitting it out and taking it out and, like, really, like, a full-on body exploration of the food that she was eating. And she was eating it too,
Yes.
but she was really, like, playing with it, and it just goes to show you that it's wrong. It's not helpful to say, "Don't play with your food," to kids, because that's one of the steps to eating it sounds like.
Absolutely. Yes. I once heard someone say that, like, why should we expect kids to be super clean and proper with their eating, and not make a mess? It's important for them to have it, smushed on their face so that they have that sensory experience and they play with it and touch it and make shapes with food. Like that's part of the process of learning to appreciate new food.
Yeah, I love that. How do you get a child on I'm gonna say on board? Because as I said before, there might be some kids who are happy with their diet of 4 or 5 things, and, just because those concerns come in or the quality of life is being affected, how do you help a child? Because I know from Corey that you also work with the kids too, like, you don't just work with the parents. I know some professionals really just work with the parents, and then the parents work with the kids. But in your experience through working with children, how do you get children to be, I guess, open-minded to the approach and to the kinds of things that you work on?
Great question. So I do engage the kids in our sessions if they're age appropriate, so like I'm not going to ask a 2-year-old what type of foods they want to be able to eat, but if it's a child, maybe 6 and up, then I really like to have them in session with their parents so that I can get them involved and give them as much autonomy as possible. Because if they have some choices of new things they can try, then I find they are more motivated and more on board. Whereas if I just say, okay, just let's work on XYZ foods, I'll ask the kid and get input from them, maybe come up with some fun, creative recipes that gets them excited. And also telling them that there's no pressure. I'm not, no one's going to force them to eat something. That also helps to alleviate the anxiety and make them more willing and open to trying new things.
Love that. I love that you involve the kids. I know from working with parents or, in this reading about sort of the best practices for feeding kids and working with parents that what we learned from the research is that the more pressure you put on kids, the less likely they're going to eat, right? And at the same time, when a parent is really worried about their child and their selective eating or they're not, they're falling off their growth curve, and they know rationally that it's, I can't put pressure on my child. I have to back off. But at the same time, they have this intense sense of fear, like my kid's not growing properly. How do you help them? Do you see what question I'm getting at? Like when your brain tells you one thing, like don't put pressure on my child, but your heart is saying like, oh my gosh, I'm so worried about this. It's so hard not to put pressure on them. Is there anything that you find helps parents to feel a little bit more relaxed and trusting and not putting pressure on kids?
Mm. Yeah, so I really do appreciate what you're saying, and I feel this dichotomy oftentimes too, especially if a child is, you know, quite severely underweight. It's like, oh, on the one hand, we really do want them to grow and eat more, but on the other hand, if we put pressure, it's just gonna backfire. So I find that, well, teaching parents about the steps to eating, teaching them, that it takes neurodivergent kids honestly, like, double the amount of exposures to a new food as it would a neurotypical child. So, that helps them to relax and not feel as much pressure, and then they know, like, "Okay, you know what? If my child's tried something 5 times, I'm not gonna give up. We need 30 exposures, like, just keep going." And, yeah, I mean, honestly, it's tough. It's
Yeah.
tough.
Maybe just even that compassion helps parents, just the
Yeah.
compassion and taking, I guess, a little bit of a leap of faith to trust the process and the research.
Exactly, and reminding themselves, the more pressure I put, the less likely my kid is gonna wanna eat or try new foods, and then they're not gonna grow. So, let's just take a step back. It's okay, this is temporary. I'll follow I'll n not put pressure and, let my kid be, and when they're ready, they'll come, and also to look at the progress that they have started to make
Mhm.
with our work together or just in general. Yeah, I think that's another big piece is reminding yourself the progress that your child has made. Because 'Cause I'll have many parents, they're like, "Oh, I don't think we're doing so great. This time wasn't so great. My kid only tried, 5 new things." And I'm like, "But they tried 5 new things.
Right,
Like,
right.
that's huge."
Yeah,
Remind yourself of that.
that makes sense. Let's take a quick break to hear about the Yoto player. Yoto is a new sponsor of our podcast. I only promote products that I really believe in, and Yoto is a great product. I wish they were around when my kids were growing up. Yoto is a screen-free audio player for kids. It uses physical cards to play stories, music, podcasts, and other audio content, encouraging independent listening and play. You can buy the cards for your favorite books from the classics like Charlotte's Web or Roald Dahl, or newer books like Captain Underpants. You can also make your own cards of podcast stories or music from MP3 files. Yoto also creates original content like radio and podcasts for kids. The possibilities for listening are varied and endless. Yoto also features a nightlight, an okay to wait clock, and other functions like white noise and an alarm. It's not connected to the internet, so kids can't go where you don't want them to go, and no one is listening in on them. And did I mention it's screen free? I learned about Yoto from Corey. Here's what she says. The Yoto Player is by far my favorite parenting tool that I've ever purchased, and I recommend them to everyone who has kids. They're an amazing screen-free audiobook player that have been an absolute lifesaver for teaching my kids to play independently. Both my kids carried their Yoto players around the house, listening to books while drawing, doing Lego, and even relaxing in their rooms before bed. We also take Yoto players everywhere with us, short or long car trips, sporting events, restaurants, and even doctor's appointments. On a recent vacation, their Yoto players got them through an 8-hour drive and were used every evening in our hotel to help my kids relax after very busy days. Yoto has an impressive and ever-growing collection of books you can buy and have absolutely helped inspire a love of reading in both my kids. Thanks for the first-hand recommendation, Corey. And I also just want to highlight that you don't have to buy their books. You can buy blank cards and record your own content. To learn more, visit reimaginepeacefulparenting.com/yoto. That's reimaginepeacefulparenting.com/yoto, YOTO. I hope you check them out, and I'm just so happy to have them on as a sponsor for the podcast. Let's get back to the podcast. So far, we've been talking about selective eating, like when your kid won't eat. But what do you do when kids are maybe not getting the cues of hunger and fullness that other kids might be getting, or that other people might get, and they are just wanting to eat all the time, or they're not getting a sense of being full if they've already eaten what is kind of a reasonable amount to eat at a meal?
Great question. So there's many factors to this. I would say first step is to rule out anything going on with any underlying medical issue that could be causing extreme hunger, because I have seen that. Or if the kid is taking any medication, some psychiatric medications make you really hungry.
So make sure they're not
And
just actually hungry before you like put your own value judgment on it. They can't actually be
yeah,
hungry. Yeah.
like maybe
That's
it's a
awesome.
thyroid issue, there could be something underlying going on. Second, I would want to know, especially if the kid is on stimulant medications, are they skipping meals during the day? Are they not eating and
Mm,
then, quote unquote, binging at night? Because getting them to eat on a schedule consistently can help to reduce that.
right.
And third is I would want to know what they're eating. Are their meals actually satiating? Are they getting enough protein and fiber in their meals? It's possible, that they're eating, 5 slices of pizza, but not feeling full because there's no fiber and not much protein in that meal. So, yeah, I would wanna look at that, and then I would say comes that interoceptive awareness. So I have a kid's hunger fullness scale that I've created. I also have one that I found online, and like a typical intuitive eating hunger fullness scale, it has steps 1 to 10. So mine has 5 steps. So it's simplified for kids. So it's either very hungry, moderately hungry, neutral. So, comfortable, not hungry, not full, slightly full, or very full. So, and I'll talk to the kids and their parents about what our body signs could be that we are getting full. And also, I might ask them, like, do you ever feel like Thanksgiving dinner full or Christmas dinner full where it's really uncomfortable? Like, I'm familiar with that feeling. I don't like a feeling. It doesn't feel physically good. So you could approach it from that lens of like, let's try to, not feel, I guess, bad. And just, it's really a practice. Honestly, it's really a practice. I find once kids do start to practice, you know, pause, perhaps during one meal a day, you could practice pausing and checking in, is my tummy starting to get full? Is my tummy already really full? And start to tune in that way. And then also, if they want to if they think that they still feel hungry at the end of a meal, perhaps taking a pause for 10, 15 minutes and then checking back in to see if you are still hungry or not. It could be that feeling has passed. And if you are still hungry, okay, then let's have some more food. And
Mhm.
there's nothing bad about that. If it's, also the child is seeking, like, especially with ADHD, is like dopamine seeking or sensory seeking, can we come up with some non-food ways to still get that stimulation? So, that could be knitting or coloring or, keeping your hands busy because sometimes that's all it is. The kid just they're
Yeah.
seeking that input.
Right, and food does hit that spot for
Uh,
that sensory or dopamine input. How do you talk to a child about that without it being, like, shaming, right? Like, "You're eating too much, you shouldn't eat that much," or, that kind of like, how do you talk about how much food a person needs and how to think about that without it being like a shaming thing?
So I will say it is really tough. It is hard, especially if I've had situations where I'm saying to the kid one thing and and the parent is, like, oh, we don't want you to gain weight. We want you to be healthy. And there's kind of conflicting messages.
Mm.
So it is very tricky and something that I'm very sensitive about. So typically you know, I might say to the kid, like I'd mentioned in the previous question, like, do you ever feel that Christmas dinner full? How does that feel for you? Like, is it comfortable for you? Usually they say it's not comfortable. So, I might say, okay, like, I might just like frame it in that lens of like using, what we eat as like a learning experience. So, if they see like, oh, I had this and I felt really uncomfortable after, then that's a great learning experience. It's not a failure. The next time, maybe we could try scaling, but, reducing it a little bit so that we still feel satiated, but we're still comfortable. We could still go about our day and go to our sports, and music classes and all that. Yeah. So that's one way. And also, so I never mention calories to kids. I never mention weight. I don't ask them to weigh themselves. I don't talk about their bodies. I don't comment on bodies. That is not my philosophy. More so just framing food as fuel, seeing it as fuel and nourishment and not labeling it good or bad. Cause I'll hear the kids say, like, oh, I was bad today.
Right.
I
Right.
had a chocolate. And
Yeah.
I'm like, "No, that's not bad. Food
Yeah.
is food. You did not commit a crime by eating chocolate." Like removing that morality
Mhm.
we often place associate with food.
I wonder if it's just
Yeah.
occurring to me as you're talking, we were just talking about how sometimes food gets food gets seen as the answer to when the body is needing some, dopamine or sensory input. And I wonder if you could just say to a kid, sometimes your body wants something and your brain might say the answer is food, but sometimes your body wants something different. And just checking in about what those other types of things could be and like checking in with yourself around that.
Yeah, I like that. That's a good idea. I hadn't actually thought about framing it that way.
Yeah,
But
like,
yeah,
what do I need right now? Is it actually that my tummy is feeling hungry, or is it that I'm bored, or is it that I'm, you know, wanting something fun or to be nice to myself or something like that? I'm not sure.
yeah. Like, yeah, of like, how can I nourish my body? How can I be kind to my body and listen to what it wants?
Yeah, because I know it just can get tricky when the division of responsibility says that the kid decides if they're going to eat and how much. And what do you do when that answer seems counter to what their body actually needs? Like, if they
Yeah,
can't, like, because
exactly.
responsive feeding is that the body knows what it needs, right? But if there's something that's getting in between, having it be a mixed message or getting in the way of the message, then it can be really tricky for parents, I think.
It is. And yeah, so yeah, I've seen a lot of dietitians shifting away from division of responsibility. I used to use it a lot more in my practice than I currently do. I'm not like talking badly about it at all. It has
Mhm.
many wonderful uses. But yeah, I mean, I'm not as like strict with like, these are the times we're feeding and kitchen's closed if it's not that time because, there are times when kids are, they are hungry and they do wanna eat something and it's not at that set time, and
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
okay.
Yeah,
So
I have heard some criticisms that if you were a person who wanted to be restrictive in your eating, that you could find that the division of responsibility as a way to uphold that, even though that's not the intention of the division of responsibility.
yes, totally.
Yeah, yeah, so we just always have to be careful with getting too dogmatic about anything and really looking at looking at our own motivations, like why are we doing what we're doing? I'm gonna
Exactly.
shift a little bit to something else Corey said to make sure to ask you about. She said to ask you about the 11-step family meal routine, and maybe you could give a couple of examples of that. Tell us what it is, and then maybe give a couple examples.
Yeah, so this comes from the SOS approach to feeding, which I learned in my training, and they've come up with this very intricate 11-step family mealtime routine. I do not recommend doing all 11 steps, but I show the families that and we pull from it the ones that they think will best support their family at dinner time. And so it's essentially different. the different steps to like before, during, and after dinner to bring some routine to mealtime and consistency and familiarity for the kids, and also to create an environment that's relaxed and fun and low pressure and more conducive to trying new foods. So you asked a few steps. So the first step is giving your kids a verbal warning, like, kids, we're gonna have dinner in 5 minutes, so that their brains can have that time to transition from, homework or playtime to dinner. And some of the other steps are washing hands before dinner, serving serving out the food in family style on
Mhm.
the table so that kids can have the opportunity to explore different foods and be around different foods. And another one of the steps that I really like that I'll use often is having a learning plate on the table. So that's, if the kid might not be ready to tolerate having new foods on their plate, we can have small bowl, small plate next to their dinner plate. That's called the learning plate. And their responsibility is to dish some of the food that's on the table that other family members may be eating, and put a little bit of that onto their learning plate. And so that's the plate where we are experimenting and getting exposure to and learning about new foods, and learning whether, how we feel about them. Yeah, how we feel about. And other steps are helping to clean up. One step that I really like is kid, if they're, if it's age appropriate, is to help scoop some of the leftovers from their plate into the compost, or into, leftovers into containers, because that's another very low pressure way for a kid to interact with different food.
Right. They're not
And
actually
often,
eating it, but they're maybe touching it and smelling it and seeing it.
exactly. When they know it's going in the compost or going in the garbage, they know they're not going to be forced to eat it. So they're more relaxed about it. And that can sometimes be a time when they end up trying something new because they don't have pressure. So that's essentially what it is. There are 11 steps to it. You do not need to do all 11 steps. And it's just fun and good to, fun and enjoyable to bring some sort of routine to family dinner time, if that's what families do or want to do. And a lot of parents have told me that it's been a life changer for them. Like, that technique alone, just having more of a dinner time routine, has been game changing.
That's amazing. Another
Mhm.
thing that Corey said to make sure to ask you about are micro changes. She said,
Mm.
for example, tiny changes like a beef burger with a quarter ground chicken to introduce chicken. So what's a micro change, and what are some maybe other examples that parents can do?
Mhm. So that is part of a technique called food chaining. Have you heard about that?
I have heard of it, yeah.
Okay. So
But go
in
ahead and
case
explain it
you're,
for everybody
yeah,
else.
exactly. So that's where we take a familiar food or a safe food for a kid and make these micro tweaks to it until it ends up eventually becoming a new food. Or it might not even become a new food. It might just be that we make small tweaks. And it helps to give exposure to kids in a way that's not as anxiety provoking, not as fearful, because it's still somewhat similar to what they've already been used to and feel comfortable with. So for example, if a kid, let's say they love smoothies and they'll only eat, like, say, a strawberry banana smoothie.
Mhm.
One tweak to it, but they won't eat like whole strawberries. So one tweak could be, we make the smoothie, we go from strawberry banana to just strawberry. And maybe then we start to reduce the liquid a little bit, so it starts to become thicker. Or maybe we leave some small chunks of strawberry in the smoothie that
Mhm.
they can get exposure to the solid piece of food. And then, maybe we reduce the liquid a little bit more. And then maybe they're having small bits of chopped up strawberry in a bowl with milk
Right,
or
right.
something. And then eventually, they might feel ready to have the strawberry. Or like the example you gave with the beef burger. If kids really, if like they love hamburgers, but not other types of meat. So maybe we make a hamburger with a little bit of lentils or a little bit of ground turkey, and then gradually a little bit more until it becomes a turkey burger or ground turkey or ground meat or, a
How
veggie
much
burger.
would you tell a child about this when you're doing this process of the micro changes or the food chaining? Would you tell them? Because I know that sometimes you could make a small change and they wouldn't notice, but then that almost defeats the purpose of making the change
Mm,
because they wouldn't know, like, "Oh, I'm actually eating chicken and I thought I hated chicken." But also some kids get so anxious about anything that's new, like, "No way, I'm not eating that even if it tastes the same, but because it has
mhm,
chicken in it." And also,
mhm,
I'm throwing a whole bunch of stuff out at you here, but also I remember back when I don't maybe you were, like, still in high school at this point because I think you're a lot younger than I am. But I remember there was a big fad of, like, hiding things in food, like, there were whole
mhm,
cookbooks that were, like, hiding vegetables and brownies and giving them to your kids, like and I
mhm,
remember some of the criticisms of that were you're breaking kids' trust, right?
mm.
So when do you tell kids that you're making a change or when do you not tell them? And how do you fit that into what you were just talking about?
Yes, wonderful question. So I am not a fan of hiding. I am not a fan of sneaking because, as you said, the kids know. They're smart. They know it. Like, especially autistic kids, their palates are very sensitive. They know if there's one tiny change to something. And then, like you said, it does break the trust. So my recommendation is to, tell kids like, oh, this is a hamburger, but it has, you might say, it's a little bit different from the typical hamburgers that you like. There's a little bit of some ground turkey. Or I also recommend giving the food a different name. So, for example, there's brownies. If you're making black bean brownies, you can call them brainy brownies. These brownies they taste pretty similar to the other brownies that you like, but we're calling them brainy brownies because they have the superfood in them. They have black beans in them, and that's going to make you strong and like a superhero type thing. So yeah, giving it a different name because then the kids know, okay, this is different. This is
Mhm.
not the same. You're not hiding. And it also makes it more fun.
Yeah. That makes sense. When I was a kid, my mom told me that, you know, halva,
Hmm.
the sweet that's made out of sesame paste.
Yes.
My mom gave me some and told me it was fudge, but I already knew fudge because my aunts would make fudge. And she gave it to me and said it was fudge. And when I tasted it, it was so radically different than what I was expecting. I still can't stand tahini today because I think of
Mm.
that early experience of having this shocking flavor when I thought I was getting peanut butter fudge or maple fudge or something like that.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. You
Yeah.
could at least call it sesame fudge.
Sure, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
Because
yeah.
a lot of people tell me that halva is really delicious, but I've never been able to get past my first experience with it.
Wow. Yeah. It's fascinating. Hey, these experiences from childhood really can come with us into adulthood.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So, as we draw to a close, is there anything that I should have asked you about feeding kids when it's tricky to feed kids that I haven't asked you about?
Mm. I mean, we could spend hours on this topic, but I would say, if I'm going to leave parents with some parting words and some advice, I would say be persistent, continue offering and exposing new foods, and it's not your fault. You are doing your best. All parents want to do their best for their kids. So it's not, I know it's not coming from a bad place that, of like, wanting the kids to eat. But yeah, so have that compassion for yourself. Know that you're not doing anything wrong. You're not a bad parent. And be patient with your kids and try to, like I said, keep offering, try to let go of that pressure. You know, they're going to be okay. They'll get there. Mm. And yeah, let go of that pressure. And also, it's honestly as much as it is helping the kids, it's also helping the parents to feel less stressed at mealtime as well,
Yeah,
because they're often very stressed and the kids feel it.
yeah,
So if they can, let go a bit, let go of the pressure on themselves and the pressure on their kids to eat, that's when we start to see the magic happen.
I love that. Yeah, because stress shuts down your shuts down your digestive system, right?
Mhm.
Stress at mealtimes is going to make feeding even harder, even, as hard as it is already, it makes it harder.
100%.
So the question that I ask all my guests, or a variation of it, is if you ever have kids someday, what do you want to remind yourself of? So what do you want to
Mm,
be sure to remember, if you have kids and you're in the thick of it, what do you want to remind yourself?
that's a great one. Yeah, well, I definitely want to have kids someday, and I would want to, yeah, I would.
It can be about anything too. It doesn't have to be about
Oh,
feeding. It could be about anything.
okay.
General advice you want to remind yourself about if you do have kids and when you do have kids.
Yeah, I would want to remind myself that parenting is hard and it comes with ups and downs, and we can do our best to, to raise kids with strong values, but ultimately, the kids are their own people and they have their own autonomy and independence to, live their life how they end up living it. So I would remind myself to like let go of pressure on myself and the stress and know that it's normal to have ups and downs and challenges with parenthood.
So true. I love that. Great advice to your future parent self. Where's the best place for folks to go and find out more about you and what you do? And we'll put whatever you say, we'll put that in the show notes as well.
Yeah, awesome. So feel free to check out my website, JackieSilverNutrition.com. We have lots of simple recipes and lots of blog posts about neurodivergent nutrition for kids, autism, ADHD, all that. So feel free to go there. We also have a free download, neurodivergent grab and go meals, which is also very helpful for parents and families. So you're welcome to download that. And we also offer free 15-minute discovery calls for families who are interested in our virtual one-on-one nutrition counseling services. And I'll give you the link that you can put at the bottom of the
Fantastic.
podcast. And it's also on my website. And
Awesome.
Instagram, find me on @accessiblewellness.
Accessible wellness. Okay, great. And I know Corey said that, even though a lot of the things that you taught her, she already sort of intellectually knew or had read about, it just made such a difference to her to have somebody who just took all the burden off her shoulders to help her navigate this. And I think that's where coaching, in whatever area you're getting support in, it's just really helpful to feel like you've got somebody on your side cheering you on and taking some of the burden off your shoulders. So I know she really appreciated working with you,
Definitely.
and I'm sure that everyone's going to appreciate the gems that you shared in this podcast. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode. I hope you found this conversation insightful and exactly what you needed in this moment. Be sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Remember that I'm rooting for you. I see you out there showing up for your kids and doing the best you can. Sending hugs over the airwaves today. Hang in there. You've got this.